MLS is back. Not the tournament, but the regular season for 2023. Toronto FC were in action last night hosting CF Montreal. Everyone's wondering if the time away is going to be a bit of a refresh, a recharge. The answer was not really. They got a goal, so that was something, right, Jordan Wilson? But they do fall by 3-2 to CF Montreal. But that wasn't what had the TFC live army going last night. It was the fact that a new report came out saying that John Herdman should now be considered the front runner. That was in The Athletic by our friend Josh Cloak and Tom Bogart. What are we making of this situation? Ollie, let's give the first word to you.
Right now, it's kind of a bit of a confusing one. People can go back and watch our show last week, and Gareth gave a good account of what we understand has happened over the past few weeks and how this has progressed. But it seemed like it had all kind of gone quiet a little bit, and so I'm kind of asking myself why that is. Obviously, now there's new reporting out from The Athletic, from Josh, suggesting that this is, still very much an active situation and that John Herdman's still the front runner. So, what kind of happened in these discussions that happened a couple of weeks ago now to leads to kind of the quiet, but also the feeling that John Herdman is still in position here. I think we have more questions than answers on that front, but it's one that, look, we've already talked about it a little bit, and I'll reiterate from my perspective. I can see the attraction and I can see why it makes sense for both sides. I think we've obviously got the impression a little bit this year from John Herdman that things have started to add up and weigh on him in terms of his motivation to go forwards with Canada, from the links with New Zealand earlier this year to some of the comments he made over the summer to now this situation. And from Toronto FC's perspective, they need a culture change. They need someone to come in and really rebuild from the ground up, I think, in every sense. And John Herdman, although there's obviously going to be questions about, going into a club job for the first time and how does he manage that transition. We know that he likes to pick up projects that maybe are in need of revitalization, in need of, a new approach and new kind of sources of motivation. And I think the appeal to Toronto FC kind of makes sense from that point of view. So it'd be a fascinating appointment. It would once again, I think, propel Toronto FC to everyone's attention whenever it happens, whether it's this season or next. And logically, it seems like one that makes sense to me.
Jordan, I want to set you up this way, and there will be a time and place for a full debrief if this news even comes to fruition. But when Ollie, and Ollie's not the only one, speaks of this culture change or hard reset, putting yourselves back in the player's perspective, there's going to be different reactions, I'd suppose. There's going to be some young Canadians that go, oh, this is the former Canadian men's national team boss. This is a great opportunity for me. But then will there be veteran players who might say, this guy's never coached a club team before? And I'm thinking of a couple of Italians in particular, and maybe try and take advantage. How do you think John would have to manage that? And what do you think the reaction would be to a man like John Herdman coming in with such a limited CV in the club game?
It'd be the biggest test. I think it's the biggest test for any manager to get everyone on the same page. For me, I truly believe the teams I've played on and teams I've watched, you have to have an equilibrium within your squad, whether that be the best player, the most talented player, or the youngest one. They have to be able to maybe sit next to each other in the locker room, break bread, crack jokes, have some sort of commonality between all working parties in the group. There's no question that John Herdman has a skill set in terms of uniting a group and bringing them together. We've seen it with the women's for Canada. We've seen it with the men for Canada. He's a guy to come in and definitely get everyone on the same page. But the question I have is, can you keep everyone on the same page? And have you been working with someone as big as a Bernardeschi or Insigne with all that the expectations that are on them? Is he the guy to do it? That's a loaded question. That's hard to really answer. I couldn't say definitively that anyone to come in for this TFC job, that this will be a cakewalk. They've had a horrendous season. It has been tough to watch, tough to be a part of. I don't think one man can come in and really change things, but I think John Herdman, who loves a challenge, absolutely, who values connection and having a team that all works for each other. I think there are some bright spots if he were to take this TFC job, but that will be a tall order to ask to get the Italians and everyone else respecting him right away. He's going to have to earn it from players, which is not normally the case with managers, right? You come in, if you have a CV, the players kind of want to perform for you. but I can guarantee not even just the Italians, but other players alike kind of speculating, looking at him, is he the man for the job? But then that would be for him to kind of get everyone on the same page and say, yes, I am.
Ollie, would that be one of the factors when Bill Manning and TFC brass consider the timing of a move like this, whether it's Herdman, whether it's another candidate, about in season or at the end of the year, full break restart? Because it seems to everyone who's paying even a modicum of attention that this thing is done. This ship, it has sank. It's not even a sinking ship anymore. They're winless in 12. They get their goal and their sarcastic celebrations that they finally scored. And yes, you want to have those little moments, but where do you lie? Because you've explained really well both sides of this argument, but if you had to pick what you think would be the best case for TFC, should they do it in season? Should they let Terry Dunfield ride it out and appoint the next man to have a full off season to get their team in order?
Yeah, the more I think about this, like the more I feel strongly that CFC should appoint someone as soon as possible. And obviously, you have to get the right person and not rush into that. But there seems to be this view out there that's like, we'll just let Terry take the bullets for the rest of the season because you're probably not going to get many results. It's not going to be particularly enjoyable. I don't agree with that at all. Nothing to do with Terry. But I think if you are going to go in a different direction with the permanent manager, I think that manager should be in as soon as possible. I think they need as much time as they can possibly get to sort through this and to make big decisions about what this roster is going to look like next season. And it's all well and good showing up at the end of the season and maybe you have a meeting with someone and they say, yeah, I'm committed, I'm motivated, I want to be part of the solution here. It's very different to see them every single day in training. How do they approach training? What's their attitudes? How are they in the group? Are they living up to those words with their actions on a day in, day out basis? And that's a very different thing obviously from the international games to the club game, is it's not just about these short spurts of energy in an international window. It's got to be every single day for 9-10 months of the year that you're committed and you're living up to that. So for me, when I look at the magnitude of this offseason again for TFC, we've said this, it feels like for 2 or 3 years in a row now, the amount of work that's going to need to be done in terms of players going out, players coming in. Like you start the job in November or December, it's not a lot of time. Like preseason is coming around really quickly, and these decisions are starting to get, feel like they need to be made very, very quickly. So if it was me, from either a coach's perspective or Bill Manning's perspective, I'd want John Herdman, if he is the guy, I'd want him in as soon as possible and starting to get to work here. And I don't really understand the mindset of let's wait till the end of the season and have a clean slate. It's not going to be a clean slate at the end of the season. There's still going to be a ton to fix and a ton to clean up. I would get started on that as soon as I can.
Jordan, your thoughts? And I think one of the things we're all keeping in the back of our minds as media and for the supporters of TFC, they're thinking it too. This would be the third different coach this season. Can the players handle that, or is it that simple? Like shrug your shoulders. There's a new guy in town.
Yeah, no, I'm one of the people that have said wait for a clean slate because I just don't see in any way this getting better for the season. I can definitely agree with Ollie's point in terms of the sooner the better. If you're hemorrhaging, if you're bleeding, you don't want to wait until months to really patch up that wound.
Let's put some
So
pressure on that wound in 2 months.
and your heart stops. You want to address it right away. I guess my sentiment with that is just that I don't see things getting better at all this season. It's almost like ride it out. But I also think there's just so much going on with TFC. Like Bill Manning's position, what he's doing with the club. You could say who's coming in next. I just don't see any bright light in bringing in someone right now at this point in time. However, if you know and you're dead set if it's John Herdman or if it's someone else, that could be a point to like get that working, because we talk about respect from players, or get your feet wet, get acclimated with the group, with the club, with how things are run, so you can make those adjustments. But personally, I just don't think if TFC the head office is on that train. I don't know if it's a financial thing. I don't know if it's just wait and see if we can get a clean break and do things in the off season. But for me, I think there's managers that can come in and do a great job for TFC and try to turn it around. But knowing that it is such a tall order, I think that also needs time to debrief. Like to come in right now, it just might be a bit overwhelming. And I don't know if anyone's looking at this TFC job and saying, yes, this is a challenge that I really want, because it's going to take so many working parts to really get this club back and functioning.
Yeah, I think whoever ends up being the next permanent head coach of this club is going to want some kind of runway in that contract, or at least understanding from management that there's got to be some runway, and working with the GM if that stays Hernandez, or if they find a coach that wants to be sporting director again. Like, that's just it. We don't know all of the details and who it might be and what the different asks are. There was, Ollie, and this will be the final point, and it's a big one to touch on in this particular conversation within the article in The Athletic, more comments about a lack of unity in the locker room for the Canadian men's national team, or at least the fact that it doesn't feel as united as it had been before. And there's so many layers to this. We all know that. We've been covering it for what feels like 25 years now. It's been 3 really that it's been in the news, but it obviously doesn't seem like it's getting closer to a resolution. I obviously, in the article, harken back to the statement that the Men's National Team Players Association put out. But if this is the end for John Herdman, speaking of hard reset, what does Canada do from here to try and get that unity back with so many big competitions just on the horizon?
Yeah, it's interesting. It's one of those things, like, I think in media sometimes there are things that everyone kind of has heard, and then there are things that people are willing to report, and there's,
Right.
different kind of standards for both. And this idea that some of the Canadian players apparently, maybe aren't as keen on Herdman's coaching as they have been in the past, and that surfaced a little bit over the summer, is something that belongs in the former category until now, where obviously this article from The Athletic has put it kind of in the public for the first time. I honestly don't know if that's the case. I've heard different things both ways. I suspect sometimes in situations like this that a lot of it comes from agents who at times tend to have very strong opinions on their clients' usage and tactics and things like that, and how whether or not they're getting the best out of them, or a coach is getting the best out of them. So I don't know on that one. It did feel a bit like over the summer, certainly the same kind of energy, the same kind of momentum that we saw in World Cup qualifying wasn't there. But that may be a thing that's kind of to be expected, to be honest, when one cycle comes to an end and you have to start to build up from new a little bit. So hard to say on that front. And in terms of where Canada goes, it's going to be really interesting. I think there's probably not going to be a high level of confidence among the fan base in terms of their ability to appoint the right successor to John Herdman right now, given everything that's gone on over the past couple of years. And it's going to be a huge decision, of one of the biggest decisions they've ever made going into 2026 to get this right. So I hope if we are headed down this route and John Herdman is leaving for Toronto FC, I hope it's an open process, a process where you're considering all kinds of different candidates, from guys who are on the staff now, like Amaro Biello, for example, to coaches in Canada. Bobby Smirniotis, I think if he doesn't get CFC, would immediately move over to being linked to Canada. And then also outside candidates as well, people who may be willing to come in from abroad and have interesting experience. Let's listen to everyone and see what the best option is. But obviously a little way to go before we get to that conversation just yet.
Jordan, final word to you.
Yeah, I think the suggestions come from the footy fans. And yes, I do agree with you all in terms of agents, but about tactics. I think when you're talking about John Herdman, what comes up the most is how he galvanizes a group, how he's a motivator, how he's an encourager, how he deals with stars, or gets everyone on the same page, which I respect, because I think that's a fundamental attribute that you need to have as a manager, at least to have a lasting career, right? Because if you do it the other way, you do tactics first and then try to get the team on the same page after, it doesn't work, right? You have to do the retreats, you have to do the team building, you have to do all that stuff to really have a sound group. Now, I think what's happening in question is you have everyone on the same page, but now can you deliver on the main stage? Yes, I think the World Cup, you saw with the group that Canada was in, tall order to ask. Morocco, Croatia went very far in that tournament, very far. And then Belgium underachieved. And then there was Canada, who was like literally the little brother in that group. And you saw glimpses and moments where Canada was doing well, but you also saw that there are moments where you're playing a two-man midfield against a three-man midfield that's probably one of the best in the tournament. There are all these little glimpses and these moments that maybe John Herdman didn't get it right. And that's where people are speculating. I think that's where it comes down to. When you have a David, Laren, Stackio, all these guys Buchanan, all these guys that are coached by top professionals, top coaches, and play week in and week out for big money games or big stadiums. They need that, the tactics and the same type of treatment that they were getting in their club. They want to switch that over to Canada as well. Again, I'm speculating. I'm not saying that these players are unhappy, but what I am saying is I could easily see that they would want to be craving more. Like, hey, we need to get this right, because like they all want to get to as far as they can get, and their rise has been fast, like shooting star. There hasn't been, this is 10 years in the making. Yes, I know as a professional, it's all the things that add up. But you look at Tajon Buchanan 5 years ago, okay, this is such a young, ripe group, and they want to move forward. And I think the country and people that are watching the game want to see them move forward. So whoever that man is or woman is or coach is at that spot, they're going to get dissected. They're going to get speculated, because everyone wants to see this group go to new heights.
It's been a long time as well. Like Herdman's been in the job for 5.5 years. Like in football, that I know it's international football, so you're not getting the same level of contact. I don't know if you ever played for one coach for that long, Jordan, but you don't see that much nowadays, even in the international game.